Good morning everyone, my name is Rooster and it's been quite the day in the world of Hearthstone. Blizzard has made some exciting announcements about formats and the average person might not have the slightest clue what is going on. So let me put it in a nice little list for all of you. First of all, let us check what exactly are these formats that Blizzard is talking about. First of all, we have the Wild format, which is Hearthstone as you already know it. All cards are still allowed in the Wild format. And then we have the Standard format, and don't be deceived by this name, this is just a format. These are both basically equals. Not exactly, but we'll get to that. So Standard will contain only cards from the current year of Hearthstone and the year before that, plus the basic and classic sets. So Standard will always allow only cards from the current year, the last year, and the basic and classic sets. Rotation will happen on the first set released each year, so that means that as soon as the next set will be released, Standard will re-evaluate and check which sets will be allowed. Important to note here, these two formats are only applied in casual and ranked play mode. So every other way of playing Hearthstone will be unaffected by this change. Standard and Wild formats will have separate ladders and separate legend rankings. So that means you can get legend in Standard and in Wild ranked. On release, when this change will be introduced, your current rank will be applied to both Standard and Wild ranked. So if you are rank 5, for example, you will be rank 5 Standard and rank 5 Wild. Now the distinction between these separate ladders will be that the rank shown to your friend will be your Standard ranking, and Blizzard has also announced that all official Blizzard tournaments will be Standard and not Wild. So what happens to all of your old cards? Cards from older sets, from older booster sets, their boosters will not be sold anymore. So you cannot get any boosters from Goblin vs. Gnomes when this change is introduced. All of these cards can still be crafted. However, do keep in mind that as soon as a booster cannot be sold anymore, all cards in that booster will no longer be Standard legal. So if your only goal is to play Standard, you have no need to craft any of the old cards. All adventure cards will be craftable and disenchantable. And this also applies to the newer sets as far as we are aware. So this means that when this change is introduced, you will be able to disenchant any cards from Naxxramas you might still have and won't be needing anymore. And also, after a while, you may want some cards from an adventure you don't have for your Wild decks. You will still be able to craft those cards, although that is the only way you will be able to obtain them. Adventure wings will only be available for purchase if you have the first wing of that adventure before it rotates out of Standard. So that means when this change is introduced, you won't be able to buy Naxxramas anymore unless you already have the first wing, and you will only be able to purchase wings of rotated adventures with in-game gold and no longer with money. So our first Standard format, what will it look like? Starting with the Spring set release, which has sort of been announced. We have no idea what the Spring set will be, but there will be a Spring set and it will probably be a booster set. Then the Standard season will start. So the sets that are removed are Curse of Naxxramas and Goblins vs. Gnomes. These cards will no longer be legal in Standard by then, but you can still play them in Wild. And this season will last until, in 2017, the first new set is released. So as soon as the 2017 set is released, all the sets from 2015 will be removed from Standard. So what does this mean for you? Any of your old cards from Goblins vs. Gnomes and Naxxramas, and in the future from other sets that have been released, will still be useful for you in Wild mode. Also, this means that new players for the game, they will have an easier and more clear path to build their decks, because the first format they will be likely to be entering will be Standard. So that means they can ignore any sets that are not legal for Standard. And also this means that they have a clear route, Classic packs, that will always be useful. Classic packs will still be useful in 10 years when Standard has rotated another 9 times. Your Classic cards will still be useful then. So Classic packs are a safe investment if you don't plan on spending a lot of in-game gold or real money on Hearthstone cards. New sets will also have a bigger impact on the Standard environment, because we've seen, as with the Grand Tournament expansion, only a very few cards from that expansion have actually impacted ranked play. Because there were already so many cards available to us, the impact of the stronger cards in a new set was greatly diminished. So to ensure that new sets will be relevant, it is a good idea to rotate out some older sets. Another great advantage here is that problematic old cards, such as Dr. Boom or Battle with Shredder, will not be a problem forever. They might be very powerful for the duration of play in Standard, but in a maximum of 2 years, they will be irrelevant for Standard, and new cards will have their chance in the spotlight. Furthermore, some notes, these might be speculative, so nothing is sure here, but Wild might be considered by the general population of Hearthstone players to be a lesser format compared to Standard, mostly because most tournaments will be held in the Standard format, and also because the rank that is broadcast to your friends will be your Standard rank and not your Wild rank. However, do keep in mind that tournaments held by non-Blizzard organizations might still be in the Wild format, and they might really attract some audience, because Wild formats are, as the name implies, kind of wild, not really curated, perhaps a little imbalanced, but they will contain all of the exciting cards that you've been playing with forever, and you can no longer play in your Standard decks right now. Also keep in mind that Classic cards will receive updates to ensure that they don't overpower the newer sets, because Blizzard has announced that they will be taking a very close look at all of the basic and Classic cards, and whether they will potentially overshadow any cards that they might print for those classes, or for any class if we're looking at a neutral card. Blizzard has confirmed that the amount of cards they will be changing is between 2 and 20. So don't expect too much, but do expect a significant change. Do keep in mind that when Patron Warrior was nerfed, Blizzard changed one card, which shook up the entire metagame. Tiny changes can have really big impacts, and I am expecting this change to have a very big impact on Constructed, on Standard at least. Some other stuff was announced and or clarified. For example, we will be getting 9 extra deck slots, which is great. Perhaps not as many as people might have expected, but still 9 extra slots should supply us with the means to keep track of most of our relevant Wild and or Standard decks. Also, Blizzard has clarified that Arena and possible other formats can still be Wild. Tavern Brawl, for example. If you're building a deck for Tavern Brawl, the rules will dictate what cards you can use, and in general, any card goes. Same applies to when you're fighting adventure bosses. You can use any Wild deck to beat NPCs, the Innkeeper, any adventures, any of your friends in a challenge, anything goes. And finally, a clarification that Discover cards and random cards, such as Battle of the Shredder, or maybe a more relevant example for the next Standard season, Mounted Raptor, will only pull cards from the format they are played in. However, of course, if you're playing Wild, anything goes. You can discover any card in the entire game. Finally, a few pieces of advice. If you enjoy adventures, or if you think you would enjoy playing Wild, be sure to buy at least the first wing of Nex before the spring set is released, because when the spring set will be released, Nex Ramas will be unavailable for purchase. You can still craft any cards you need to play Wild, but of course, crafting cards is very expensive, and just imagine crafting a Lothab or a Stalag and a Fugan from your hard-earned dust. That is going to cost you. So if you even think you'd enjoy playing some of these cards in Wild or in Tavern Brawl or wherever, make sure to buy at least the first wing, because if you earn the first wing, you will be able to buy the others. And if you don't own a lot of GVG cards right now, and if you think you might like to play with a lot of GVG cards, if you'd like to play a mech deck sometime in Wild, prioritize those boosters for now. However, if you do not recognize yourself in the above, stay away from any Naxxramas or any Goblin vs. Gnomes boosters, because they will be irrelevant in Standard, and if you don't have a large collection, you may want to focus on Standard, and that means buying Goblin vs. Gnomes boosters for now will not be a great investment. And finally, just a quick reminder, the sky is not falling. All old cards will still be playable in Wild format forever. And while Blizzard may be focusing on Standard over Wild slightly, that doesn't mean Wild is completely irrelevant. Other organizations will still be organizing tournaments in the Wild format. You can still play Wild with your friends. You can still play Wild cards in Tavern Brawl. It will not be completely irrelevant. And do remember that while some classes might be hurt more by the removal of certain key class cards compared to other classes, do consider that Blizzard will change classic cards and they will add a lot of new cards in the new set. So don't immediately think Druid or Rogue or whatever class will be way overpowered because their cards have not been touched. The new set and the classic changes will also change a lot. Alright, that is it for me for now. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this has been of some use for you, and I'll see you next time.